Hey again, really good to be with you both in the room and online. Thanks for your presence today. Just one thing as we talk a little bit about giving, just one thing you can know where a little bit of your giving goes. We support 3 missionaries, most of them around the world, but one of them that we actually support is a young guy named Caleb Sleeman, and Caleb and his wife Sam actually are missionaries through an organization called Athletes in Action to Michigan State, and so Caleb, in the hours after the events there, was in lots of communication with students, and by the next night, the ministry team that he's a part of was in a room full of students just processing and navigating the events that they all experienced. Caleb's actually on a trip right now with a bunch of students, and so it just very tangibly, your faithful giving is right now having an impact in places we probably won't get to and won't have the same influence and impact. So thanks for that. All of it matters, and grateful to be a part of that with you. We've been in this series for the last couple weeks, just called The Blessed Life, and want to just navigate our way back through it a little bit and establish a little bit of a platform for all of us to stand on today as we continue to navigate it. And a couple of weeks ago, we started this series, and we just said, hey, if we're going to talk about giving, because money really is, money's not a spiritual thing in and of itself, but our relationship with money is spiritual, just like everything else in life. Our relationship with it is spiritual, and Jesus wants to shape and influence and help us experience fullness there. And so when we started, we said, boy, how do we just get to a grateful heart first? Like, let's talk about a grateful heart, and then that actually will shape everything else for us. Let's start there. And we started with just a verse I want to go back to, and you don't have to try and look this up or anything, because I'm just going to refer to it quickly, but it's in 2 Peter chapter 1, where Peter, an early follower of Jesus, early denier of Jesus, and then follower again of Jesus. So he's got the full gamut of life experience. He talks about to these people. He writes this letter and says, you could have, God's given you everything you need for fullness of life and godliness to stay in rhythm with him. He gave you every single thing you need. And then he says this in verse 4. He said, through all these things he's given you, he, Jesus, has given us his very great and precious promises, so that in all this work that Jesus has done in his death and in his resurrection, you may participate in the divine nature. So we started a little bit a couple weeks, just the reminder or the new reality that you and I, when we surrender our lives to Jesus, we become participants in a holy, divine, godly, heavenly nature, which is crazy to think about, right? Because, right, you know your dark stuff, and I know my dark stuff, right? It's like, it doesn't feel very divine to me, right? But yet here's Peter writing about Jesus, like you could actually participate in the divine nature, having escaped the corruption in the world shaped by its evil desires. You shape this pattern that says, let's live independently of God, or let's live as if God is holding out on us, or we could do it better than God. And let's come back to this, because you've been given this divine nature, which means you and I want to give because God's a giver. I mean, that's really the starting point, right? God's a giver. You have life, you have breath, you have this world that you live in because God's a giver. We have an opportunity at salvation because God's a giver. We have the hope of heaven because God's a giver. We have the chance at healing and restored relationships when they break because God is a giver. It all comes back to this thing that God is a giver. And so if we participate in the divine nature, we want to give. It's just part of who we are. Part of who we are. And then last week, we actually tuned into a message from a guy named Robert Morris, and we did that just because he is uniquely anointed and empowered by the Spirit to talk about this theme, this reality. I want to say this to you. If you weren't here last week, and you haven't had a chance yet to absorb that, I want to encourage you to very quickly, like there is some urgency in this one, quickly jump on our YouTube channel and watch and digest that message. The church that they're a part of is they just give things away all of the time. They're very generous, but because it's a broadcast deal, we can only have that message up for 1 month. So we're already a week in, okay? So get there and absorb that off our YouTube channel, because after that we'll have to take it down. We can get you a link to some stuff, but it's helpful if you can see it in our context. So, but just this really good, tangible, but helpful, insightful look at really why God invites us to be like him in this thing of giving. And I want to just quickly walk back through the passage that we walked through last week, add a little bit of commentary to it. Malachi chapter 3. So if you got a Bible or if you want to unlock a phone or something, most of us probably don't spend lots of time in the book of Malachi. A lot of us probably even think it was called Malachi, but it wasn't Italian, okay? It's like more Hebrew than Italian. Okay, but we'll kind of navigate just a couple lines of this. It's a conversation God is having with the people of Israel. He's trying to help them restore this relationship with him. They've had some drift, as often happens. And he's trying to say, look, this is how we can navigate this relationship a little bit. So Malachi, it's actually the very last letter in the Old Testament of your Bible. And so this is what it says. We're going to pick up Malachi chapter 3 in verse 6. This is what he says. I'm the Lord. I don't change. I'm always perfect. I can't get any better because that would mean I wasn't perfect, but I am perfect. And because I'm perfect in grace and kindness, you are not destroyed, you descendants of Jacob. Verse 7, ever since the time of your ancestors, there's hundreds of years, thousands of years of history with these people now and God trying to live in relationship with them. Ever since the time of your ancestors, you have turned away from my decrees or my ordinances. And part of what we learned last week is that an ordinance is just, it's the normal way somebody lives in something. So when God has a decree or an ordinance, when God gives an ordinance, it's really just the ordinary way that his children live. It's the ordinary way in which his children live. That's all that means. See, I've given you this, and this is the normal thing that my children do. You have normal things in your family or in your friend group or in however you share a suite or whatever in a dorm. You have a normal way of living, right? Just as your group of people. Well, God's like, we have normal way. As part of this family of God, we have a normal way of doing things. And God's talking about one of those here. You've turned away from all those, though, and you haven't kept them. You haven't lived in them. So return to me, and I'll return to you, says the Lord Almighty. But you ask, well, wait, how are we to return? God responds with a question, which he often does. Will a mere mortal, will you men and women rob God? Yet you have actually robbed me. You have literally taken from me. You have taken things out of my hand. But you ask, how are we robbing you? And then God just real clearly says, you're actually robbing me in the tithes, the giving of the first 10% of your income and the offerings, any giving beyond that first 10%, you're robbing me. And because of that, you're living under a curse. I didn't curse you, but you've lived outside of my hand of blessing. You've lived outside of a way that I could bless all of your life. So you're actually living, you might be living good, but you're not living the best. You might be experiencing a lot of good, but it's not the best. You might be experiencing what feels like a lot of positive momentum, but it's always limited. It's always limited. If you're living in this curse, you're always shortchanging yourself. And he says it's the whole nation of you because you're robbing me. So do this instead. The normal way of living, the ordinary way that people in the family of God live is they bring the whole tithe or that first 10% of all the money that comes into their life into the storehouse where they get fed. It's this picture of what you and I would know today as the local church, that there may be food in this house. Some of how we are like spiritually fed in the place that we call the church is directly related to do we honor God in this tithe. Like that's what he's saying. He's like, look, if you want to be this, then make sure you're following this ordinance, living in what's normal for me. And then I love this. Test me in this. Test me. It's the only thing God says, go ahead, try it. Dare you. Double dare you. Double dog dare you. I'm not sure how far to keep going, but right, that's what he's doing. He's like, hey, look, try me. If you want to, just test me, says the Lord Almighty. And see if I will not throw open the floodgates of heaven and pour out so much blessing that there won't even be room enough to store it. And on top of pouring out blessings in your life, I'll prevent pests from devouring your crops, and the vines of your fields will not drop their fruit when it's ripe, says the Lord Almighty. He says, I will actually rebuke the devourer from you. I will actually rebuke destruction on your behalf. There's nobody else you would rather have doing that for you than God himself. It's like, I will jump into the fray for you. Verse 12, then all the nations will call you blessed, for you will be a delightful land. Here's what he's really saying. You'll always have enough. if you honor, if you live in this ordinary way, if you bring the first 10%, the tithe, to your storehouse, what you and I understand is this expression of the local church. Jesus talks about the same thing later. If you do this, you will always have enough. Now, the question becomes first, like, what's enough? What's enough? And there are some things that I'm just not sure what enough is. I can't answer it. I can't answer it. Because in just pure material things, enough looks very different all around the world, right? I mean, what's enough for us if we went to country A, enough might look different. If we went to country B, it'd look different again. Country C, it'd look different again. It might look very different. We might really have to ask, okay, does it mean I get enough to live whatever I picture as the American dream? Do I get enough to live to keep up with my neighbors? Do I get enough to live to keep up with whatever image I've currently created? Do I get enough for that? I don't know. I don't know. Here's what I know. That if we'll honor God in this, we will always have enough to fully live our God-given purpose. If we will honor God in this, we will always have enough to live our God-given purpose. Our God-given purpose as a human, as a friend, as a contributor to the world, as a carrier of God's kingdom, as a husband, as a wife, as a child, as a sibling, as a leader, as an employee. We will always have enough to live our God-given purpose and design. God says, I'll protect that. I'll protect that. But what I'm asking you to do is an expression of our relationship is to trust me and live what is ordinary for every one of my children. For every one of let's just live this. Now I know because this is the topic. What I understand is that what some of you are like, John, I came this week because we talked about that last week. I wasn't looking for round 2. Why are you still talking about this? Well, here's the reality. We talk about everything more than once because most of us need it more than once. We do a series on marriage, it's 4 or 5 weeks. We did 8 weeks on how to live a life full of vitality in the fall. Right? I mean, we talked about, look, how do we live this full life, 4 weeks, right? It just needs more than one. And here's the thing. There's some of you got this 1% inside your head right now. It's like, I wish he would just talk about things that Jesus talked about. Let me just help you. Jesus talked about money. Hang on for a second. Jesus talked about money more than heaven and hell combined. Jesus talked, this one will bother some of us. Jesus talked about money twice as much as he talked about prayer. It's crazy, right? Why? Because he knew our relationship with it would be spiritual. He knew it could have tons of potential for us. It could keep us in this place of great blessing, or it could get us outside of his hand of blessing. And really what Robert Morris said so well last week is we're not really at the end of the day hurting God financially. God owns everything. And he can take it if he wants it. What we're really robbing God of is the opportunity for him to bless us. God's a giver. He wants to give. God grieves when he can't give. God grieves, listen, God grieves when he can't bless you. Right? God grieves when he can't do something good for you because you aren't doing what's just ordinary for his children. If you're a parent, you kind of get that, right? What you want to do is you want to do good. But when your kid won't kind of stay in what is ordinary in your family, it's like, man, I can't do that. I can't give you ice cream if you're going to talk to your mom that way. It's like there's a conflict there, right? I was like, please don't rob me of the opportunity to bless you. And I know it's hard. This is really hard. It is weighty. I get it. And we're not the only ones to think it's hard. Let me tell you some of the reasons that I understand that it's hard. I just want to show you some stats. Here's one of them. Again, this is just ordinary. Right? This is just what's ordinary. Bring the tithe, the 10%. Honor me in this. Trust me in this relationship. Tithe, bring the 10% into your local church. Here's what it is. But let me give you some stats or some survey results to help you understand. Here's one. 5% of churchgoers tithe. 5%. God said, hey, let it just be ordinary. 5% does not sound ordinary to me. Right? It just doesn't sound ordinary to me. And what if, so that means 95% are not, right? What if 95% of us inside of church circles were committing adultery? What if 95% of us were stealing from our companies or our employees? What if 95% of us were abusing people in our family? What if 95% of us were lying rampantly and gossiping and slandering? What if, I think we would be deeply troubled, wouldn't we? Most of us would find a different church, right? It would just like deep down that would bother us, right? Now I do want you to know I picked the encouraging one here. That's the only study that has that number, 5%. I picked the encouraging one. It's the only one. There are multiple other studies that all say 2.7. I just wanted to be encouraging. Just trying, right? It's the only one that says 5. So it's like, okay, so if it's ordinary, we're not living, why? Because it's hard. And some of us say, yeah, but when I get more, then I'll do it. When I get more, then I'll tithe. When I get more, then I'll be generous. Check this out. Households that make over $75,000 are the least charitable. How about that? Households that make over $75,000, they're least charitable. Why is that? Because if we don't start when we have pennies, we won't do it when we have hundreds. It gets harder. When all of a sudden that number is bigger. 10% of a dollar is a dime. We can do that, right? 10% of 1,000, that starts to be different. 10% of 10,000, that's different. 10% of 100, right? It gets harder, not easier, right? Rockefeller said, who was infinitely wealthy, he said, if I wouldn't have given on my dollars, I wouldn't have given on my thousands. Right? It gets harder. And then there's some of us who would say, well, it's okay, I know God says that's ordinary, but I don't really want to do that. I have chosen to live my way. I've chosen to give the tithe someplace else, and I'm super generous. Which I commend the motive. But I want to just share with you a sobering stat. And this is a survey, so this is people identifying as Christians talking about themselves. And keep in mind, when somebody asks us a survey question about ourselves, we tend to prop ourselves up a little, not knock ourselves down a little, right? If you're going to take a survey and you're going to fill something out about yourself and about I'm pretty good at that. Check this out. On average, people identifying as followers of Jesus give 2.5% of their income. Anywhere, everywhere. That's the total. A lot of us will say, yeah, but I give to missionaries, or I give to the waitress, or I gave to my neighbor, or I gave way more than 10%. Really? Because we answered the questions that say not so much. Right? Why is that? It's not because we have unpure motives. We're good people. You're good people. It's because it's really easy around this thing because our relationship with money is spiritual. It's really easy to get tricked by the whole dynamic. It's really easy to pull it outside of what's ordinary for God, and we live it without God's wisdom and without God's insight, which ultimately ends up being without God's accuracy and his understanding. It's just difficult. What's really sobering is that number has been true for years. That needle hasn't moved in years, which is really interesting to me. And it's even more sobering. It's challenging for me when I think about this one that actually in the Great Depression, people gave more. So it's not about quantity. I don't think any of us are saying we're worse off than the Great Depression, right? Is it getting tough? Is it getting uncertain? It is. It's a little unique right now. So it's okay, that's not it. And we're just talking about giving, but money on the whole can be a unique dynamic for us. and how we live with it, and our relationship to it is spiritual, and it impacts all of our other relationships, not even just our relationship with God. I just came across this one a couple weeks ago, but check this out. Just let this sink in for a second, and don't look at the person sitting next to you, okay? But a third of all marriages experience what's known as financial infidelity. A third of all marriages. Somebody has a secret credit card. Somebody's got a secret spending addiction, gambling addiction. Somebody's got something else. Somebody's hiding money. Somebody's siphoning something off. Somebody's set up a private savings account they haven't told their spouse about, right? 1 out of every 3 marriages, that's true. Why is that? It's not because we're bad people. It's not because you're bad people. It's not because we necessarily haven't been able to. It's because this relationship with money gets really tricky, and we often live as if it's not spiritual, or as if we would kind of know how to do it best. If we could live, like if we could control this one, not God. It's part of why God is saying, look, I want to bless every part of your life, your marriage, your health, your finances, your job, your peace, your well-being. I want to bless all of it. Don't rob me of that chance. Please don't rob me of that chance. Please don't rob me of that chance. We often wonder, like, what would Jesus say if he was in a room with a bunch of people like us, like physically, tangibly in the room? I really do wonder if what Jesus would say is, man, I love you, and I want to bless you. Man, I love you, and I want to bless you. I don't think he would lead with 90 things you need to hurry up and fix. His love would actually compel us to want to live more like him. Right? We'd be so overwhelmed by his love and his desire to bless us. And that's why he says, like, just let's do what's ordinary. Bring the first tenth of everything you make and everything you get and bring it in. And we need to trust him in this. We need to trust his principle in this, just like we do in every other thing. Just like we trust in his forgiveness. We want to trust in his grace. We trust in his salvation. We trust in so many of his other ordinary principles or his commands. We trust in so many others. We got to trust in this one. And here's part of why. Jeremiah 17:9 like shines the light on it. It says, man, the heart is deceitful above all things. When we only trust kind of our heart or how we feel about something, ooh, that's tricky. That gets, we deceive ourselves sometimes, right? We deceive ourselves at times. So here's the thing, I know it's challenging. I know it just is, it's just hard. I mean, I grew up in this environment. I grew up hearing about this principle, this normal behavior for every child of God. I grew up in that. And yet in my first job, which was my first full-time job, post-college and everything else, which was in a church, okay, maybe something like this, like several months in, I'm with another guy who's on staff at that church who became one of my greatest friends and mentors, still one of my greatest friends all these years later. And we're driving in this car. We're going to get lunch together. And he says to me, hey, now that you've been here 6 months or so ago, he says, just how are you doing? And how's God honoring you for your tithe? And it was really awkward because I wasn't tithing. It was a really awkward moment of silence. Bird, squirrel, anything to distract us, please. Right? I'm like, wait a second. Why am I not doing that? I know this. I know God wants to bless. I know. And yet it was so easy to live in this habit of not. It was so easy to slide into it, right? And this is not the sole reason. Again, I try and say this a lot. I'm not playing victim to parents or anything else like that, right? I was old enough to make my own clear decision in that. But I want to just a word to parents for a second. One of the things that happened is I was a teenager and I'd started working a little bit part-time jobs and all this kind of stuff while going to school and playing sports and that kind of thing. I remember one day in church with my parents, I remember my mom in this fleeting moment as giving was happening. I remember my mom in this fleeting moment with the purest of motives, wanting to bless me, saying, oh, you don't have to give. We do that for our family. You don't have to give. We do that for our family. I'm like, yeah, you do. Put the money back in, Mom. Right? I mean, that was one of the best moments of my teenage life, I thought. But fast forward at 4 or 5 years, I've got my own job, I've got my own income, I'm doing my own thing, and I'm still living that. Parents, we get this really cool opportunity to teach our kids that God wants to bless them. Don't rob him of the chance. He can be trusted. He can be honored. He can be good. Like, your kids are never too young to start. Well, we're talking about grace and forgiveness and Jesus and purity and all these other things. Let's talk about this. The world does have other ideas of what your kids should do with their money. So let's talk about this. Let's keep this part of the conversation. So that was this moment for me in this car with my friend of like, oh, this real shift. And now we're several years later, and I want to just tell you for a minute, like, spend a couple minutes just telling you, hey, here's why Erica and I do this. Just as a couple, husband and wife, here's why Erica and I do this. And some people are like, you act like you tithe to Journey? Absolutely. It's like, wait, isn't that weird? You tithe the Journey, get paid? Nope, it's not weird at all. Because it's ordinary for all of God's children. It's what we ordinarily do, like ordinary. And so we tithe, and we kind of, I make the same all the time. Erica's with her job, it's changing all the time. Sometimes in the summer it's 0, So every 2 weeks, like whether we pay this tithe, and it's all this percentage based, and we kind of try and live this thing out, right? But here's why we do it. Here's what comes out of that passage and out of this relationship for us. Number one is it reminds us, every time it reminds us who provides. It reminds us who provides. It reminds us that God actually has provided everything. And we can say, man, I worked really hard for that, whatever. And it's true, but God gave us the skills and God gave us abilities. Even if we worked hard to develop them, God gave us the ability to develop them. God gave us the gift of life. God gave us breath in the morning. God gave us the opportunities that we have, the relationships that we have. All it just is this reminder, God, let me give this back to you. I don't want to be a robber of it. I don't want to rob you of the chance to bless me. And I just want to acknowledge you provided all this anyway. It also reminds us that he doesn't really need it. Doesn't really need it. When you return this tithe and maybe some offerings to God, it sometimes to us can feel like a really big number, right? But every now and then you just stop and think about what's going on globally and around the world, and that God owns all of it. He doesn't really need it. God didn't ask it because he needs it. God has unlimited resource, right? He's good. He asked for it because it's part of the relationship dynamic. It's part of our heart and his heart being connected. It's not because he needs it. It's because he wants the opportunity to bless it and bless you. Which is also this really good reminder, because God owns everything, that he could just take it. It reminds us he could just take it. He could take it. He is bigger than you and me. He is stronger. He's smarter. He's more creative. He's more resourceful. He could take it. He could take it. Maybe most significantly is every single time we do it, it reminds us that God's a giver, not a taker. God's a giver. We have it because God gave abilities and opportunities for the jobs that we have. We give it because God gave to us the opportunity to be in relationship with him. God gave us the opportunity to even test him in this. God gives us this open door of heaven and his blessing. God gives us the opportunity to return things to him so that he could continue to bless us. God, it just reminds us God's a giver, not a taker. God didn't ask for 10% back because he's trying to take something. He asked for 10% back so he could give everything. He's trying to give everything. So I said, let this be normal for you, because what's normal for me is to bless you. So let this be normal so that I can bless you. Let it be the normal thing that you do. Let me just show it to you this way. So the oldest of our daughters, Sydney, Sid, from early on, has had a really strong love affair with Goldfish. The food, not the animal. The animal would be our other daughter, Mackenzie, who has had a goldfish or two. Thanks to some of you, we don't need any more. Okay? Sid has always liked goldfish. Any of you like goldfish? Goldfish fans in the house? Yeah, come on, somebody. We still got some goldfish fans. Yeah, you like goldfish? Come on, Sam, you like some goldfish? You guys like some goldfish? Sid, you guys like goldfish? Huh? Brad, you like goldfish? Oh, come on, somebody. There you go. Oh, that was a terrible... Brad, let me try again. Don't worry about that. Let me try again. Let me go further back there, too. Okay, right. All right, there you go. Steve, goldfish? Like goldfish? There you go, man. Have some goldfish, Steve. There you go. Okay. Sid, come on, I can't forget you, man. These are here because of you. There you go. There it is, okay? When Sid was about 3.5, she said, hey, Dad, can you get me some goldfish? And there's little bowls, a little more bright pink than this one, and Sid crawled up her little self on a little stool that was next to this little island type thing we had in our kitchen, a little extension of a counter. And I just poured her a little bowl of goldfish like this, and she crawled up there and she just started doing her goldfish eating thing, just one after another. She's just eating it. She's hanging out. And I walked by and I said, hey, Sid, let me just have a goldfish. Let me have a couple goldfish. And I didn't at this point know she was this quick, but she took that little chubby 3.5-year-old hand and just smacked it over the top of that thing. She said, nope, these are my goldfish. Oh, really? They're my goldfish. And she just kept her hand over that thing. I just wanted a couple goldfish. And in that moment, something really profound happened just over goldfish. Sid forgot a couple things. She forgot a couple things. Number one, she forgot that I actually provided those. And I don't mean I just poured them in the bowl. I bought those. Technically, they're my goldfish. Technically, I own the goldfish. Technically, today, I own the car. I own the... Never mind, different topic, okay? But the whole different message, okay? Whole different message. Never mind. I provided those. But she forgot just for a moment. Not because she's bad. She's good. She just forgot for a minute that I provided this. She put a little hand over those and just guarded them. She also forgot that I don't need them. I don't need those couple of goldfish. Number one, I know where the bag is. Number two, I could fill her room. I could fill her bathtub. I could fill her bathroom sink with. I could give her more goldfish. I could give her so many goldfish she would never want another goldfish again. But she forgot that for a moment. Didn't quite understand it in the moment. So she kept her 3.5 little chubby little hand over that thing. Another thing that Sid lost track of in the moment is that I could take them. I could take them. Now, Sid's 18, and she's been dancing for years, and she's pretty athletic and strong. I'm not sure I could take the goldfish now. But when she was 3.5, I could take the goldfish. I could take the goldfish. But in the moment, that wasn't on her radar. But maybe most significantly, when she slapped her hand over that, just for the moment, she lost track of our relationship just for a minute. And she saw me as a taker instead of a giver. Instead of seeing me as the one who had provided these and generously given them to her, and actually with great joy filled the bowl, and actually with great joy would fill the bowl again and again and again. In that moment, when I started to reach for the bowl, she saw me as a taker. She didn't see me as her dad, who was a giver. When we take our income, and it all comes in, or we take gifts that we get, or we take inheritance, whatever income comes our way, whatever money comes our way, when we slap our hand over the top of it and say, God, I'm going to do it, these are mine, I'm going to do with them what I will, we actually lose sight of the fact that God's a giver, and we begin to view him like a taker. Like he's somehow the taker, and we've got to protect what he actually gave, what he actually provided. God's not a taker any more than I was a taker of simple goldfish. God's a giver. He's a giver, which again is a significant reason that you want to be a giver, that I want to be a giver. We actually want to live deep in our soul. We want to live what God lives. We want to live how God lives. Let's go back to 2 Peter chapter 1. Remember this? Out of all of his great and precious promises, he gave us all these great and precious promises. Remember that? That's where we started. Look at it again. Through all these great and precious promises, he gives us all of these things so that you may participate in the divine nature. So that you could actually, in a holy, godly, supernatural way, be a giver. Like God's a giver. That's what he's doing. It's not ordinary. God didn't design it to be ordinary for us to slap our hands over the goldfish and over the income. What's that? No, God, no. And to view him like a taker when he's really the giver. He provided them. He certainly doesn't need them. He absolutely could take them. And he's not a taker. So the question becomes, how do we respond to this? How do we respond? Like, if what God has laid out for us can be ordinary, if this is his command to make this ordinary, the question becomes, like, how do we actually respond to that? What do we do with that? Let me just give you 3 options. Let me just give you 3 things. First one is this. Keep tithing. Some of you, this is a done deal. Some of this is a done deal. Now, you saw the stats earlier. Probably most of us, it's not a done deal. But some of you, it's a done deal. You give 10%. Some of you, you give more. One of the things that Eric and I try and do every year is just look at things and say, can we give 1% more? Can we give 1% more? Can we give a part of 1% more? Can we give, God, what is the invitation into today? Just the other day, Erica was just praying kind of about how we're doing some things, and she came back to me, and she said, John, I just really sense the Lord just on her income that's changing all the time. She said, I just really sense the Lord saying that we should give 3% more. And I'm like, I don't think you heard him right. I'm like, we need to do more prayer on that. I mean, no, but we're always just trying to say, like, God, what do you have? Okay, the 10th is like this starting point. Some of you are there, and some of you don't. That's great. That's great. We bring the 10th plus some back here, and then beyond that, we give to some orphan things, we give to some missionary things, we give to, right? It's great. Some of you do that too. The 10th comes here. The 10th comes here because this is together our storehouse. Some of you just need to keep doing that. And you already know the blessing of it. You already know the blessing of it. And it inspires you every time we talk about it because you know the blessing of it. And you actually want other people to experience it. I talk to some of you like, I wish I could just convince everybody. I know, me too, right? Second thing, you could start tithing. You could start tithing. Some of you, maybe you give, but you've never really thought about a percentage. You give because, hey, I want to give, I want to honor God, I want to honor God's work. But you've never really thought about a thing, and you kind of give whatever you have with you in the moment, and all of that is good. All of that's good, and the motive is right. And right, again, God's not condemning us or anything. He's inviting us into something. It's like, this is my command and my way of doing it. Some of you today, you hear the directive of God. You hear the strong, clear invitation of God. Like, this is what we do. And you're going to say yes. You're going to say, I'm going to start. Maybe I don't give anything, but I want everything God has for me. And if I trust him with my life and eternity, I trust him with this. He's not a taker. He's never been a taker, so why would I think he'd be a taker here? I'm going to do it. Some of you today, you'll go from giving nothing or giving $5 or $20 here or there or giving, and you'll start tithing. And I'm just telling you, I've already been praying for you that in the next 48 hours, God's blessing would somehow be so tangibly clear to you that you wouldn't be able to miss it. It'd be absolutely undeniable. And I'm going to tell you, I already know one story of where somebody who made the decision last week, it was true. Within just a couple of days, there was this overt and obvious blessing of God that they couldn't even put it into words. They could only put it into tears. I think God wants to do that for you. Right? Some of you will start today. It'll be a new life path. This will be a new rhythm in your relationship with God. Some of you will say, you know what, I want to do this, but boy, 0 to 10, I don't know. And so what you'll do is you'll say, look, I'm going to pick a starting point. I'm going to pick a starting percentage, and I'll just start moving. Maybe I'll start giving 2%. Maybe I'll start giving 3%. Maybe I'll start whatever, and I'll make a move. Over the next 6 months, I'll get up another percent. In the next year, I'll get 5 more percent. Whatever it is, right? You'll pick a starting point today. You say, this is what I'm doing, or this is what we're doing as a couple, or this is what I'm doing as a single person, or as a teenager, as a student, or whatever. But I'm in, right? This is where I'm going. And here's how tangibly I want to just help us walk this out, okay? On the right-hand side of every row, there's a little tray. If you've been here a little bit, you're kind of used to some of these trays. Right-hand side of every row, once you take that tray, I want every single one of you to take a card and a pen. A card and a pen. Just a card and a pen out. You're going to find a card that looks like this. And here's what I want to say to you. So I want to say, it is a commitment. What are you doing? But here's what I want you to notice. If you don't hear me on anything else, you got to hear me on this first. There's nowhere on here for you to write your name, and you should not write your name. Okay? You're not going to write your name. And now, some places do, and that's fine. Maybe one year we'll do that. I don't know. It's not in the cards right now, but just I want you to say, okay, what is that thing? Okay? What is that? And down at the bottom, there's some verses there, just remember. Okay? And then down almost all the way to the bottom, 2/3 of the way down, you can see those responses. I'm going to keep tithing. I'm going to start tithing. I'm going to take a step towards tithing. What are you going to do today? What are you going to do today? Now, some of you, I understand, in a room this size, some of you are going to leave it blank. Okay. You're going to have to sort that out with the Lord. Are you going to do what's normal for his family? You're going to do what's ordinary for his family. But you just mark one again. Don't put your name on it. Not asking for that. And then I want you to just grab a phone, take a picture of it. What'd you do? Take a picture of it. Even if it's blank, maybe you want to take a picture of it, and you just want to let these verses have a chance to just say, okay, I need some time to sort this out with the Lord. I hear what John's saying or whatever, but I need a little bit of time here or something. Take a picture of it. If you mark something, take a picture of it. Okay? Here's the thing. I want you to know, and I want to know, every single blessing God has for you, and every single blessing God has for me. I don't want to leave any of them on the table. I want to take them all, because we got a God that's a giver. I don't want to rob him of the chance to bless me, and I don't want you to rob him of the chance to bless you. Now, with your card in your hand, I want you to stand. Just go ahead and stand, and here's how we're going to end today. I'm going to give you a blessing and a sending like we often do, and then we're real tangibly going to make a move with this, and this is why I asked you to take a picture of it, okay? I want all of us just kind of on our way out today, just come drop this card up here. We're going to let this stage almost represent like an altar for us, an altar of decision, an altar of commitment, right? And just come drop the card. You didn't write your name on it, so nobody knows what you're doing, right? It's okay, there's none of that in it. If you feel better putting it face down, put it face down, doesn't matter. Nobody's trying to get you, okay? And even if you left your card blank, just come up here and drop it down. Just say, no, God, I'm not there yet. Or, God, I got to sort this out a little bit. I got to look at it for myself. Okay, that's fine. But every one of us will just drop the card here.